Hey, everybody at Connect the Dots. It is Brandon. Thank you so much for joining me. This is episode 17, and I'm excited to bring you a guest today who is my friend, Susan Hallett. And she is a coach with a specialty in blended family. She has a master class called Blend It Together, and you need to check that out in your show notes or down wherever you are listening to this episode. I'll put the notes down there. I'll put the links down there. If you or someone you know is working on blending families and some of the trials and challenges of bringing families and kids together under one roof, she is your coach. But hey, today we are talking about disc profiles and faith. What we're really talking about is your individual wiring, your personality, and how do you mesh that with your faith? I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of times when I read scripture, I feel weird. I feel broken. I feel like I don't fit. Like my wiring, my high D, high I, there's a uniqueness to it. I get that. But sometimes it's really hard for me to look at scripture, look at the great people of the Bible, and feel like I fit somewhere in the midst of all that. So, Susan and I are going to have a conversation today about blended families, and we're going to talk about DISC and how we resolve our own personal wiring and our faith. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. And stay tuned for at the end. We got a little bit of a wrap up. And here we go with Susan Hallett from Blend It Together. I want to bring on my friend, Susan Hallett, who is passionate about helping step families create solid foundations and support them as they navigate unique challenges of the blended family life. She is also a friend of mine through the John Maxwell team, and she is a DISC expert, and we are going to get to that. We're going to talk a little bit about DISC as well as her story, how she's overcome amazing challenges, has built this incredible blended family, and how she's also just an amazing encouragement and support to me. Susan, how'd you like to join us?
Hey there. Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
I'm excited to join you this morning.
I am super excited to have you join me this morning. How you doing? I know that we'll just tell everybody right now, you're nervous. I know you're nervous.
Yeah. One of my 2020 business goals is to show up scared more often. So here we are. I'm a Texan as of 10 years, and the way we do it down here is go big or go home. So
that is true. That is true.
Well, my name is Susan Hallett, and I live in Texas as of 10 years. I'm from Virginia, and Jeff and I have been together for 16-ish years now. We've been married for 11. This will be 12 years this year. And he brought 3 boys. I brought 1 boy. So we have 4 boys. So managing stress is a big part of why I've done personal development and seeking and trying to figure out, why am I living with these crazy people?
Of course. Well, you are a blended family coach and expert. And so tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously it's hard, I would imagine. I'm fortunate. We have 5 kids and we're not blended, but you've gone through it. You've learned a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Wow. I'm still discovering how to tell my story, because I do understand it is my story. However, other people are involved, and just to make sure that everyone understands that what I'm doing is out of love and in a motivated to help other people. So it has been hard. It's been an incredibly hard journey. And Jeff and I are soulmates. We are 2 peas in a pod, and most people who know us think we've been married absolutely forever. But it hasn't always been easy, just because that's the way we look as a couple.
Yeah. Well, hey, for all of us, right? Blended family or not, I think so oftentimes our projected self is much, much better than the true self. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing kind of the dirt and the challenge, because
I had a call this morning with somebody out of Turkey, and she heard me speak on a clubhouse, and that's a whole nother subject. But and her whole, she's a social media expert. We were talking about business, but on the clubhouse, I shared a bit about my story and the challenges that I've dealt with, and she resonated with it and got on the phone with me and just said, "Thank you," because I thought I was the only one. So I want to thank you in advance for sharing your story and talking about the challenges and being authentic with it, because, you're going to help somebody today.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I know it's scary.
It is scary. 2019, I do have to say, though, had some incredible blessings. And I know that 2020 was not an incredible year for everyone. But quite frankly, we had a lot of amazing things happen in our family, and I'm incredibly grateful for them. And one of them was Jeff's youngest son had a birthday this year. And two of his boys.
Doesn't he have one every year?
He does have one every year. However, this one I felt was extra special because it showed the amount of healing that our family has gone through. And so, like I said, Jeff has 3 boys. I have 1. And the two boys that were with us on that day, one was the birthday boy and one was another one of the sons. And both of those sons at the beginning of our relationship had chosen to not be at our wedding. Wow. They said, "We don't want to be part of this family. We're choosing to not be part of this family, and we're not showing up."
Man, that
so we had one of his sons and my son at our wedding, and that's how we started our relationship. And this year, it was those 2 boys that we had a celebration with. We did zipline adventure. We had an amazing dinner together. We really spent the entire day together, and not just spending it together, but really truly enjoying each other. And this is such a far cry from where we started, where, quite frankly, we were challenged being in one another's presence, and not losing our minds or making Jeff crazy, which is more often what happened than not. Jeff said something to me early on in our relationship with the boys, and it has stuck with me ever since. And he said, "Why can't the boys see the woman I fell in love with?"
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. And I couldn't deny that, because they didn't see the woman that he fell in love with.
Why is that?
I think I was duplicating behaviors that I knew, because they were behaviors that I had experienced growing up, which was a bit of conditional love, where, if you aren't following the protocol, you don't feel like you're really part of, accepted or along for the ride. And somehow, even though I hated feeling like that myself, I duplicated it.
Yeah.
And I had to acknowledge that. And I also had to acknowledge that I was a big part of the problem. Like the entire problem. Why was our family not blending? And sure, they came with their baggage. They came with the baggage of, "You're not my mom. Don't try to be my mom," and all of that. But I did not help the matter.
Right.
And I had to acknowledge my part in that. And I had to step back and say, okay, so if I'm a big part of the problem, why am I trying to change them?
That's hard stuff. How did you get to that place?
Prayer. And that's what I knew to do. Like I dug in and I said, Jeff and I have an amazing relationship. I'm so incredibly blessed by our relationship, because it's the first couple relationship that I've ever been in where I can have complete, honest conversation and really pour my heart out. It doesn't always go well because Jeff and I are also opposite personality types. And so we complement one another, but we are not the same. And so that's been, tweaking along the way to figure out, okay, how do I speak to his personality type and his natural wiring? And how does he understand my natural wiring? And, all of that. So we've done well along the way, but we've always had pretty good conversation. We've always been willing to show up at the table of honest conversation, even if it hasn't gone well.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the blended family with you, especially being a blended family coach and an expert. Share with us a little bit. I mean, obviously bringing two families together, you shared that two of your sons basically said, we don't want to be a part of this. How did you handle it? How did you and Jeff handle that?
We struggled, and we did go to marital counseling before we got married. And one of the exercises was, what was the discipline like in your homes growing up? And what was it like as you were previously married? And that was our first hoop to jump through, was understanding that discipline was completely different. His family was kind of more of a wing it along the way kind of thing. And discipline was equal punishment in his world. So he didn't want his boys to experience that, especially after the divorce. There's a challenge with blended families of wanting to be their friend and wanting them to like you and want to be part of the family. But there's also the calling, and it's a biblical calling, to be the head of your household, and to set some standards. And for me, I had lots of standards, but they weren't being given in love. And there's a verse in Corinthians, you can speak the tongues of angels, but if you don't speak it in love, you're just a clanging bell. And I was a very loud clanging bell for a very long time.
What do you mean by that? Give us some, I know this is hard and it's emotional, but can you give us some real life examples of how that played out in a blended family, in your blended family?
So for instance, sometimes it's important for kids to understand the why behind things. Sometimes, I'm a DI personality type with DISC. And so it's all about getting to the point, not a lot of fluff conversation and whatnot. And, I would leave out good morning before, hey, can you take the trash out? Or I need you to take the trash out, and it's like little things like that, and acknowledging them as a living human being and a creation of the Most High, and just acknowledging them and saying, good morning. Did you sleep well? Instead of, hey, I need you to take out the trash.
Wow. That's huge insight too. And I think, you and I have talked about this before, and I know for my personality as well, I've had to learn a lot over the years. And I love that you've started talking about that, because you and I both, with the John Maxwell background, we talk about you got to know yourself to grow yourself. And that's huge insight to know about. And it sounds like you use the DISC tool to get an understanding of how you show up in the world and realize, I'm so task oriented that I forget that there's people on the other side of me.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, and then how did you start to discover what your personality it's really what it is, your personality, how you showed up in the world, was having a negative impact on you trying to blend this great family?
Because of how they were reacting to me. And, they were reacting to what I was putting out, both a vibe, which is, we pick that up intuitively, as well as the words that were coming out of my mouth. And, you've heard the quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
Well, until you can show them how much you care through words or deeds or whatnot, they don't care what you know. And I can spew all the personal development to them in the world, but until they know that I care about how they show up in the world and that they become productive individuals in society and become great fathers and spouses, then they're not going to care what comes out of my mouth. And I had to adjust how I was speaking and adjust even my motivation. Like I had to learn to care about what someone else thought and how their day was, because as a DI, we're so focused on the task and so focused on whatnot that it's not that we don't care, but I don't know, but sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
Outright. And that's hard to say and hard to hear. But that's not how our brains work. Yeah. But that's also not how you connect with people. You have to learn to connect with people, because there's only 3% of the population that are Ds. So if I'm only connecting with 3% of the population, how effective am I going to be in my coaching, in my mothering, in my being a wife? I'm not going to be very effective.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that is, I think a couple things that we're sharing here is, one is for all of us, like we've got to know our personality. And I've heard it said, like, you got to know what it's like to be on the other side of you. Mm-hmm. And so often we get tunnel vision and we think, this is the way I am, so this is the way everybody is. And we act the way we think we're supposed to act.
Right.
I spent years, and I would go to these like either men's groups, or I just go hang out with a bunch of guys and everything. And I come home and I tell my wife, and excuse me, anybody, I go, am I a dick? And she'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I'm trying to give, I'm trying to serve, I'm trying to be included, I'm trying to share what I know and be giving. And I just feel like people don't want to be around me. They don't accept the way I'm showing up. Well, that was a lot of long, hard years of feeling rejected. Mm-hmm. And then it was over time that I realized in my personality, well, I was just showing up in a way that I thought was normal. Like, I am a high D. I'm a high I, high D. But, somebody would say something and my brain starts going, oh, where's these opportunities? Like, oh, you know what you could do with that? You could da-da-da-da-da. Oh, that'd be really cool. And it's this business builder in me. And I thought I was being giving. I thought I was sharing the best qualities of me. And when some people started giving me the blessing, my gosh, of being honest with me, they're like, I always felt like you were trying to get something out of me. Like,
wow. And see, that's a D's primary fear.
Yeah.
Is taken advantage of. And then your C's are going to feel like you're criticizing them for the way they're already doing it. So that's what they're receiving. And you're giving what you think is a benefit to them, and what they're receiving, depending on what emotional state they're already in, they're receiving the exact opposite.
Yeah. And when I finally got to the point of realizing that, okay, I can't expect anyone else to like change for me. I got to figure out how to, I think that, contain that part of my personality and not be ashamed of it, but not also feel like I have to blah it out all the time.
Right.
And it's one of those things for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that some of my biggest strengths are also my biggest weaknesses.
Yes.
So those types of things help me so much in business. They help me even in relationships where I feel like I can see things that are going on that others don't. But if I'm not careful and I just start spewing, and it's not even in a negative way, it's just like, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity.
Right.
Different personalities look at me and really get turned off by it. And that was a hard awakening for me.
Yeah. Yeah. In DISC, you and I both learned that any strength overused is your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And I have definitely found that.
I learned that.
I learned that the hard way. They didn't have to tell me. It was more of an aha moment when they said it out loud.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, how do you, I used the term earlier about the blessing of honesty.
Yes.
What does that mean to you, and how did you experience that? Because unfortunately, it tends to be us high Ds that have to have the blessing of honesty to really kind of wake up.
And the interesting thing is, to Ds, it is a blessing, because we don't want people to tell us, oh, you're doing great, if we truly suck.
Right.
That's literally the worst thing you can say to a D personality type. And then they feel you're very ingenuine, and then they lose trust in you.
Yeah.
So something I thought about the other day, I was sitting with someone and we were talking about morals and values, and something that came up with as we were going through the questions of determining your morals and values was, what do you appreciate about your closest friends? And that was such an easy question for me because I don't have a lot of them, but the ones that I do are authentic and real. Mm-hmm. And I love that they don't BS me. I was sitting with sitting at coffee yesterday with a girlfriend, and we had this exact conversation again. And it's like, we are so different from one another, but at the same time, both of us appreciate that we can say anything to one another. We don't take offense, and we have a great time together. But that's what I've always had with my husband, is he's always been honest with me.
Right.
So I never ask him, do my butt look big in these jeans? Because if I don't want to hear the answer, I should never ask you that question. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I love it. Well, I'm gonna transition on that because you put a butt right in the middle of our conversation. So now butt's a transition word. So
it is.
Good. Susan, I think I spent a lot of years frustrated because I thought I was giving my best to people, and it was being received in such a off-putting way, and I had no clue. I mean, it's just unfortunate ignorance sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. And as a high D, high I thought I was blessing people. I thought I was giving. I was sharing insight. I'm like, hey, these are my strengths. Can I give them to you? And they were like, whoa. Talk to us a little bit about, you're a DISC expert, you're certified in DISC, and you use that in your coaching with blended families. Talk to us a little bit about DISC, the value of it, and why knowing our personalities is so important for relationships.
It's quite frankly, I don't know how people live together without studying some sort of personality type process, whether it's Enneagram, True Colors, DISC, or whatnot. It's been a game changer for our family. And when my first introduction to personality types was True Colors, and my husband and I were at a personal development seminar, and we realized the personality types of our kids. And so we came home with tools to be able to completely transform our relationship with all four of our boys. For instance,
wait. I don't want you to just brush over that, because people need to hear this. Rephrase that again, because they're simple. Like, me, I talk strategies and systems. Everything's about strategies and systems. And I know that can be kind of scary words, but it doesn't have to be scary. Repeat again what you took from that personal development workshop and how it changed your family.
So I'm going to tell you a story, and I think that'll answer your question.
Awesome. Love stories.
For instance, and it's a short story. So I write myself notes because I'm flighty. I tend to forget things. I need my notes in front of me. So I write notes. I stick them on the fridge. We have a Post-it board up there, all kinds of stuff. So I'm always writing notes. And then I would find that when notes ended up on the fridge, my notes ended up on the fridge, I would have one son in particular, mine actually, that would become a little bit more rebellious. Like he would it was like something was up his crawl. You know what I mean? And so
Texan.
So I realized, in True Colors, he's an orange personality, which is all about no rules, party, no responsibility, that kind of thing. So even though the notes were for me, he was seeing them. Actually, he went to Jeff and he said, "Why is she always yelling at us?" And Jeff said, "Okay, what did she say?" And he goes, "Do you see those notes on the fridge?" And Jeff's like, "They aren't even for you."
Wow.
So he was hearing things I was not even saying out of my mouth.
Right. Wow.
And so once we realized, oh, wait, like he's he's almost offended at the notes because they are so against his wiring. Now that's a challenge that we still are working through today, because you have to understand that society has rules and society has boundaries. So that is unfortunately something we have a continual thing with him. However, I also understood that if I wanted to communicate more effectively with him throughout the day, that having notes in a space that was also his was probably not going to be an effective way for me to get other things through to him when I wanted to have a conversation with him.
Right. So what did you do?
I put notes in my space.
Simple.
Yeah, or put them in my phone, or put them on my calendar.
See, and so what I love about that, it's so clear, right? It's so practical. So first of all, you learned your own personality. You learned about your kid's personality. You saw something you were doing that just caused problems. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to put my notes in my bedroom instead of on the refrigerator.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah. Another incident that happened, we were going to the grocery store, my husband and I, and shopping for coffee. He's a CS personality type. He needs time to process. He likes a lot of information. And I'm the DIs. I'm quick. I'm going for coffee. I'm going to grab what I know, put in my basket, move on. So we walk down the coffee aisle. In my mind, we're going to grab the coffee we've always grabbed and move on with our day to the dairy section. But instead, on this day, he's decided he wants to read the backs of the bags of all of the coffee to make sure he's getting the right coffee for him that day, because right is also very important for C's, and he's a CS. And so I'm standing there and I at first, before I realized what was happening, I'm like, okay, well, we always grab this one. Let's grab this one. And he goes, no, wait, I want to see if that's the one I really want today. So he would put it back on the shelf. And then it's like, oh, well, there's that one. And we really, really like that. We've got it before. Let's grab that, throw it in the basket and go on. And he goes, no, I want to look at this one too. And so finally I realized, like, I felt the vibration coming off of him of like this agitation. And so I just would very quietly just walk to the end of the aisle, looked at some other things, teas or whatever, came back. As I saw that he was moving towards me, he had picked the coffee, whatever was right for him that day. And we were moving down the aisle, and he turns around, he goes, why do you always have to rush me?
Wow.
And so his perception was that, I was really rushing him through his decision of coffee making. And I thought it was just, we were grabbing a bag of coffee.
Right.
So that could have been a really big blowout in the grocery store if I had not stepped away from that and allowed him to do what he needed to do in that moment.
Yeah. And that's the key right there. You said it could have been a really big blowout. And how often in our marriages with kids, driving down the street, in our offices, whatever it is, that we have this, they don't like me, I don't like them. And it's not true at all. Right. It's just the personality differences rub a certain way. And until we're willing and able to take a step back and know yourself, to grow yourself, or know what it's like to be on the other side of you. And I think even just taking the time to ask questions to get to know other people. I think, one of the best questions we ever asked our kids, and we've been asking it to them for as long as I can remember, was a very simple, what is it that I do that makes you feel like I love you?
Ooh.
And when they're right. And when they're little kids, what I was doing was asking them, what's your love language?
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. You're figuring out their love language. Yeah.
But if I said that, they would have been like, what are you talking about? What's my love language? But, like my son, he's like, well, when you spend time with me, I'm like, oh, ding, ding, ding.
Quality time.
Right. And, one of my other daughters, it was about, well, when you tell me I'm good, and when you encourage me, I'm like, oh, words of encouragement. Right.
Yep.
Exactly. And so taking the time and translating that into all my relationships. And now, granted, I don't go up to people in the office and go, hey, what is it that I do that makes you feel loved? That would be kind of weird and creepy and all those other things. But just being able to come from a place of curiosity and go, okay, I know my personality. And like you, I know I'm in that 3% of this weird people that are, task oriented, get shit done, and forget. And it's not that we don't care about people. We're just so focused on getting the task done that we forget.
Right.
But trying to remember not to forget.
Yeah. I had another person in the personal development space, and she's a D. In fact, I think her and her husband are the same personality types as Jeff and I. So she's the D. He's more of a feeler, CS, and or SC probably. And and he said, "Why don't you tell me you love me more often?" And she's like, "I told you once. It's never changed. If it changes, I'll tell you." It's like, oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure if I ever told my wife that I would be assaulted in some way. No, she would never do that, but she'd think about it. Oh my gosh, right. And the thing that's interesting with that is there was no malicious intent. There was no ill will. It was just very factual for that personality. Wow. Yeah. So we're going to talk about today DISC and our faith. I know that, your faith, and thank you for not, reaching through and smacking me as I cuss on our live, but I just got to be authentic to who I am, right?
Yeah, we're human. Yeah.
You wanted to talk, we were going to talk today about DISC and our faith. And I know for me that trying to resolve that combination of my personality, my faith, the way that I read scripture, and honestly, I just felt like I was a complete fish out of water and a total screw up for so long when it came to my faith.
Which is a lie of the enemy, by the way.
Amen to that. But when you don't quite know that combination of your personality and how you show up in the world and know that this is the way that God wired you, for me, it was really frustrating. And it was a big part of my like my mental health challenges, my anxiety, my depression challenges, all those things, because I just didn't feel like I fit anywhere.
Right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think at one point I actually got to the point where I was questioning my salvation. If I'm showing up this mean, am I really saved? Like, how is Christ in me, the Christ that exemplifies agape, perfect love in me, if I'm this hateful to people and the people that I'm living with?
And how did you why did you think you were hateful?
Because I was. I'm also able to step back and say, wow, and I think also because I was pretty much a mirror of what I had seen that I perceived to be hateful.
Okay.
So I'm like, if I'm duplicating that in a certain way, and I felt that, wow, that's really hateful or mean, then that's also who I was. And I thought, how can I be saved if I'm expressing myself in that way? And
did that have something to do with your personality, or did that have more to do with just, trauma that you experienced in life? What do you think?
Did which part? Acknowledging that or realizing that?
Well, I think it's a combination. Let me see if I can ask this a different way. Was the behavior you were displaying that you thought was bad, was it truly bad, or was it just your personality was acting out in it as well? Did that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I think I was an uncontrolled D. I think I just literally, my D was off the chart, and I did not understand. I did not understand that while yes, that is my natural wiring, that wasn't how that natural wiring should have been expressed from a believer.
Got it.
Because, we're take charge kind of people, but we're not dominating kind of people. That comes from a place of ego, not love. So how do I express myself as a DI in love, not from a place of ego?
Got it. So you used the word evil, though. You said like I was evil, or,
I think hateful.
Hateful. Well, there it was. Hateful.
Yeah.
Um,
well, I was like, when you're a kid, you're like, man, I think you're soft when you're a kid and people are expressing themselves out of their own hurts and hangups, and you don't see it that way. You just see it projected at you. That's the way it was perceived, and that probably wasn't. I know that was not the motivation behind it.
Right. That's where I was getting to, is that I think, and maybe this is just me bringing in my own garbage and my own background, is I think so often my task oriented, my high D of actually wanting to help people, like, hey, let's get this done and get it done efficient and move your business along, or move this along, or, hey, I can, the coach in me would come out and go, well, have you thought about, maybe saying it this way to your wife instead? And yeah, I was totally inappropriate because they didn't ask me to.
Got you.
But it wasn't from a place of hatefulness, even though it was received as a place of whether inappropriate or whatever. How do we go about? I keep getting us off track on DISC. I know that, but I'm so fascinated with where this conversation is going. Talk to us a little bit about, I know that a lot of our members of Connect Your Dots come from a place of faith. And I have found over the years that there's a challenge sometimes within faith-based communities about really understanding your personality and living it, versus we all need to be this way. We need to be quiet, meek, good little Christians.
Right.
Yeah. So,
well, Jesus had moments of righteous anger as well. And he never stepped away from truth. He wasn't meek in that he allowed people to believe things allowed people to continue to believe things in his space that were not true. He still called people to truth, but he did it lovingly. He did it through stories. And I'm learning to tell stories. I'm learning, instead of telling people, do it this way, do it that way, to tell stories. And it helps them understand the why behind why that may be important to tweak or whatnot. But quite frankly, it's only with the guidance of the Holy Spirit that I can walk through my day and not have to do damage control by the end of the day. That's the way I'm wired. And at first I thought, wow, there's really something wrong with me. And I tell you what, after having my own DISC assessment done, it was such a relief to acknowledge that my Creator created me as a DI. He wanted me to be a DI. There's nothing wrong with being a DI. And he's there to help me do it, express it in a loving way, and express it so that it furthers his agenda and furthers his kingdom. But if I'm bashing people, in my righteousness of my D, then that's never going to influence anyone towards change.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm still stuck at, I need the constant guidance of the Holy Spirit to get me through my day, so I don't just completely screw up. And I know that's my personality as well. And it's never from a place of maliciousness. It's always just my personality just kind of spits out all over the place and pisses people off. It's so hard.
Yeah.
It is.
It's kind of a prayer at the beginning of the day. Just help me walk out me in love. Yeah. Like, help me to do this area of my life better. Show me as I'm doing it, how to tweak it and make it better. And I do. I hear impressions. Like, he'll show me pictures of things and analogies of things, and that's where some of my blogs come from. But yeah, we expect this loud, roaring voice, and I'm actually kind of jealous of my husband because he has actually heard the audible voice of God one time in his life, and our pastor has heard the audible voice of God twice in his life, if I remember that correctly, that he said from the pulpit one time. And I haven't ever heard his audible voice, but I get impressions and kind of see pictures because I'm creative. So he speaks to me in the way that I receive things.
Yeah. Could you speak to that a little bit? And I know that, neither one of us are trained biblical scholars, but I find over the years, and I know I've got my own, trauma stuff that I deal with. I've got my own personality. I have my own, just challenges that I face as my personality and entrepreneurship and the highs and lows and all that. But I know for me, I get frustrated a lot when I hear people share like, oh, God spoke so clearly to me about this, that, or the other, when I hadn't experienced that. And I would I'd get depressed because I'd feel like I must not be worth God's time to speak to.
Wow.
And two, I would get challenged with what am I doing wrong? If they're listening, and it's the way my mind works, like if then sentences, right? If you do this, then that happens. It's the pragmatic nature of my mind, of the way I'm wired. I would just feel like I wasn't worth God's time to speak to, or I was too stupid to figure out how to do things the right way for God to speak to me. Can you address that, just in case there's other people out there that are feeling like me? I want to give you an opportunity to explain, like, because when you say like, oh, and God gives me visions, or he gives me pictures and things, and it's so clear. I love that. And it makes me extremely jealous.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that there's parts of me that I've been working through over the years that would be really frustrated, not at you, just frustrated.
Right.
I would hear things like that because I'd go, I don't experience that.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
And there's giftings right now that I'm seeking passionately after, because I currently am not expressing them and I want to, and those gifts are for all of us. So I'm actually reading a book right now by Emma Starks called The Prophetic Warrior, because I would love to be able to do that. And I say I would love to, and the book really explains that we all are currently able to, but it's our belief system as to that we can do it, the reason we're not expressing it. So I'm still getting through that book, but there are areas that I want to be able to express spiritually more than I currently am. And so I'm kind of on that search, on a similar search as you with that, like, why am I not? Is this not for me? Is this not for me right now? I don't know. So, I'm on the hunt for that as well. And, but scripturally, it's all already ours. And so I don't know. I think you and I are similar in that we both are doers. And quite frankly, God wants us to just be beers with him. He wants us to passionately just be with him, which I have a hard time with, because I have a hard time just being still. In fact, I created a plaque for my office here. I have a daybed in my office, and I created a plaque to go above it. And it says, be still, Psalm 46:10, because that's what he wants from us. And I have to remind myself, he doesn't want me to do more stuff all the time. He wants me to just be. And as I had talked to you in one of our other conversations, one of my most amazing experiences was one time when I was out of town. And I was in a hotel room, and I just laid on the bed, and I put a worship CD on, and I didn't do anything. I wasn't dancing. I wasn't doing any. I just laid on the bed, and I just wanted to receive, and I just wanted him to show up. And I ended up with tears streaming down my face, because it was just such an incredibly beautiful experience. And it's like, well, but then again, why don't I do that more often? Because I'm so busy doing. But that's not, he wants me to be more, not be more as in striving, but just like be present, just stop and be still. And so that's another thing I'm working on this year. But quite frankly, it's just, I'll be driving down the road, and I'll be listening to your podcast or somebody else's podcast, and you'll say something, and then he finishes the sentence kind of in another direction. And that's kind of what I hear. Another thing that happens to me too is our church has just the most incredible worship time. And it's like a key gets unlocked to my brain. And it could even be words to the song or not. and things just start flowing. So I don't know what I did to ultimately have that happen. So I don't know that I can give you like your bullet point instructions, because I know you want your bullet point instructions, because that's who you are. You want your process. I think
strategies and systems, Susan.
Yeah,
just give me the strategy and the system, and I'll go make it work.
Yeah, I think, quite honestly, I just said, I'm here, use me. I just said, I'm here, use me.
You know, I got to admit, over the last like 3-4 minutes, you've been speaking a foreign language, and I have no idea what you said. I mean, I love it. Honest, I love it. I love hearing the simplicity of it. And then it'll get my personality. It just gets so frustrating for me, because it's like, that's it? Really? But what about the doing? What about the doing?
How does he ask us to come to him?
With a big to-do list, a task list that are all checked off, done, and done perfectly. That's not the right answer.
As children. Do your girls run to you with their to-do list? Or do they just run to you with their arms open and they say, Daddy? How do they run to you? And then how do you feel love from them?
Yeah. No, I get it. I was, I'm part saying the truth, and I'm part exaggerating the truth. This is the journey that I've been on over the last, it's been about 30 years that I've been a Christian, and I'd say I pretty much ignored it for the first 10 because I just didn't get it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And
I
then
grew up Southern Baptist, and it was all about not going to hell. And as a teenager, you're like, well, I'm not going to die anytime soon anyway, so I don't need your rules right now. They don't apply to my life. And
I'll worry about it later.
I'll worry about it later.
Yeah.
And then once I became introduced more to charismatic denomination or way of doing things, I realized that it wasn't about the to-do list. It was about relationship. Mm-hmm. And relationship is sitting with somebody and having coffee. It's about sitting with them and having conversation. That's what relationship is. It's about connecting. Connect the dots.
Just drive it in a little bit more, Susan. Just like, come on, Brandon. It's crystal clear. It's right in front of you. I don't understand why you're struggling with this. You realize that that is the voice that I hear most often is, and I don't mean to turn this episode into being like Brandon therapy session, but I guess it is
good though.
But it is so often I hear that, Brandon, this is simple. Why don't you get it? Like, why is it so hard for you? And I could list off lots of reasons why, but we'll save that for another episode. Yeah. We'll bring on Oprah to analyze me or something.
And the other thing, and I'm not opening a can of worms here, I'm just going to make a statement that you can do with what you want, is that oftentimes we have such a dysfunctional idea of what a loving father is, that it's hard for us to, I know, it's hard for us to want to spend time with him.
Yeah, right? That's really good.
Right? Really it's hard for us to want to run to someone when we're scared of what that has looked like in our life previously. My father, I loved him to death, and he's passed on. My father committed suicide when I was 19 years old, but for the most part, he was pretty disengaged. If he was home, he was in the shed doing his thing. He worked shift work. We didn't see him very much, but his and my personalities were very same. We both have somewhat of a demented sense of humor that needs to be tamed to a certain degree. So we liked the same movies. It made my mother mad, and all of those things. And I wish that we had, when I was younger, we spent a ton of time together. And then as I got older, he just was disengaged. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but so for me, and I've had a lot of men in my life step up into that father role, and I'm very thankful to them. And one of them is actually my ex-father-in-law. He's still my dad.
Wow.
And so, these boxes that we put our families in of, oh, well, you're no longer my family, so you're no longer that. Mm-hmm. But he was that for 11 years.
Yeah.
So how could I all of a sudden say, oh, well, you're not my dad anymore? Like that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
So I still call him for advice. I still call him on my birthday. He still calls me on my birthday. We talk at holidays. We talk randomly. He's my dad.
That's so
cool. And so it's super cool that we've been able to protect that and still have that. But for the most part, I have experienced what a loving earthly father looks like, but that's not the case for everyone.
Yeah. So what are a couple things? I want to start wrapping us up here, but what are a couple of things that people of faith should be aware about when they're looking at their DISC profile and their personality to keep them from, falling into some of the big pits that I've fallen into?
I think one is acknowledging that who you are is who you were created to be. He made you that way for a reason. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a defective model, because I thought I was. I thought, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me?
Special kind of broken. That's my expression.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing for me was just saying, wow, I'm okay. I'm okay. There may be better ways to express myself and who I am and how I show up in the world, but at the gut of it, at the heart of it, I'm okay. And so letting myself off the hook, because as DIs or as Ds, we're also very hard on ourselves. Mm-hmm. We held ourselves to a pretty high standard, and we have expectations. So not only do we have expectations for the world, we have expectations for ourselves too. So it's exhausting being a D.
Right. What about, because the topic is about how our faith has impacted our DISC profile or understanding. What about identifying with biblical characters?
JMT has that resource as far as kind of labeling the different biblical characters. I didn't resonate really strongly with that training. So as far as, I think Paul was probably a D, because I think he had to work on loving people,
right?
But he was very good at directing and showing truth and all of that.
But how about, can you speak to that practically for us? Because, what I'm thinking is that we've got people in our community that are faith-based. And then we talk a lot about in Connect Your Dots, like you got to know yourself to grow yourself. And you got to know yourself to show up well in your family and show up well in your business. And I do think that there is that challenge sometimes when you bring in faith, because you got this book full of biblical characters, and we're basically told, go be Christ-like. And here's an example of a bunch of, stories that tell you how to be Christ-like. And a lot of them I read are just, I look at it and go, it's just not my personality to be like that. But yet here's the book, here's the Bible telling me that I'm supposed to read this and be like these people. How do people resolve that when they get a character that is totally different from who they are?
But they were all different too. If you read the Gospels, each one of them came, Luke, he came very practically. He was probably a C personality type. And then you have the one that cut off the guard's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane when they were trying to take Jesus and arrest him. He was a hothead, but he was still accepted into the group of disciples, right?
Yeah.
And, then you have Judas, who Jesus said from the beginning, I'm choosing the 12 of you. One of them I know is Satan, and you're still included. And it's like, whoa. He allowed him into his space, knowing the enemy was going to use him. And I'm not saying that we're the enemy. I'm just saying that, God can use any personality type, and we're not all supposed to be the same, because we're not all going to resonate with everyone.
Right.
As we go out and share what he has for us, and, the peace that he can offer us in this crazy chaos of 2020 and 2021, and the hope that he offers us in 2020 and 2021 and beyond. You know, I know where my citizenship is. You know, that's a whole nother subject. But I think that he uses every single personality type. So to think that they were all meek and mild and lovey-dovey and, you know, kind to one another all the time is, I think, an unrealistic view of who those people truly were. I mean, they were pretty interesting characters.
Right. So basically what I'm hearing you say is know your personality, and you're going to be able to identify with some people in scripture.
Yes. Yes.
And others, it's just like people that we know now. We have to kind of look at it from their perspective. And
yeah. And there's lessons to be learned. We can learn lessons in the story, but that doesn't mean we're like, oh my gosh, he's my twin.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, hey everybody, we are approaching an hour, which means this is probably one of the longest episodes we've ever done. And Susan, that's not a bad thing. Thank you so much.
We had fun.
We had a lot of fun. And I think this one hit a lot home for me. As you know, I'm still working on things. I'm still trying to figure this stuff out, and being a high D and a high I. And as you said earlier, there's only 3% of us. It's a challenge. And I find it challenging every day to feel authentic and yet know that I've got to adjust constantly some of the things that are going on in my head, or else I show up as a jerk, or I'm received as, you know, a jerk or too direct or too whatever. And it's a challenge.
Yeah. But you also have incredible value to add to this world.
And sometimes it's hard to find those places because people don't want that, you know, jump in and lead, or jump in and have an idea, or jump in, create. And I'll be honest with you, one of the challenges I've had as a startup guy is that I feel like I see solutions, and then you go share it with people and they go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Do you ask questions before you offer the share?
You know, I've gotten better at that over the years, definitely. But, you know, as a startup person, Henry Ford said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Right. Yep.
And so there's this challenge of being an innovator, of asking people what they want or creating what they need. And those are the times that, if I'm being honest, that I struggle with going, God, how come you made me this way? Because I don't know where I fit.
Right.
I really don't know where I fit sometimes, because this innovation, this seeing things that aren't there and then going, oh my gosh, you know what we could do? And people look at you and go, no, that's stupid. Or I don't get it. It's very isolating for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the entrepreneurial journey already is fairly isolating, right, for a lot of people.
Yeah. And then you throw the personality on it, you throw the faith on it, and you know, then you throw, you know, some bad experiences where what you feel, and I think everybody feels this way in different ways. I can just speak from my experience of where I feel like I showed up very true to who I am to add value to a situation, and then to be rejected. It's very conflicting. It's very confusing. It's like, hey, I showed up in the fullness of who I know I am, and I was rejected. What do I do with that?
Right.
So how does DISC solve that problem for us? It's simple, right? Strategies and systems.
DISC solves that problem. I think that's just a grit. You know, I think grit, it just keep going. Ask for him to bring people into your life that will say, oh my gosh, yes. You know, ask for him to bring those people into your life that resonated. Ask for him to bring the right partnerships into your life. People that are good for you, healthy for your dream. Yeah.
Those are good words.
We've all seen what bad partnerships, one way or another, whether it's in your life partnership or you know, your business partnerships. Yeah. You know, we don't, I know personally, I haven't sought him for guidance in that the way I should have from the beginning.
Yeah. I'm sure we're all guilty of that, right? So, well, everybody, we are coming up on an hour. This has been a long episode, and I'm okay with that. It was a great conversation with you. And everybody, Susan Hallett she offers coaching services. She has a masterclass launching soon called Blend It Better that is totally geared toward taking all of her experiences, the challenges, the stuff that they've had breakthrough in their family, and put it into a masterclass called Blend It Better for blended families. And you can find her at Hallett Coaching Solutions on Facebook. I put her links inside of the comments here on Facebook. On the podcast, I'll put them there in the show notes so that you can find her. And Susan, anything else that you would like to share, that how people can connect with you, find you, follow you?
Also on LinkedIn, but I think you got that. So for now, I think that is good. Yeah.
All right.
Remember, life is a journey, not a destination.
Life is a journey, not a destination. Well, everybody, I am just going to end it there. Just remember that life is a journey. It's not a destination. Thanks so much for being with us today. This is the Connect Your Dots Show.